the way to be a Maimon de Rebbeinu Shalom is to breathe things to the border you're not supposed to. If you get a Maimon in Talmid Hashem and a Maimon in Chaim, it's unbelievable. A Maimon in Rebbeinu Shalom, in it Bavado, you try to Moshe, it's unbelievable. The best
how much Roundup did you bring back?
How much?
Roundup did you bring back?
Oh, none. I didn't have room for Roundup. Okay, I think we're on. I think the recording's on. Okay, gewaltig. Yeah, that's the spring trip. Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara. Zok the Heilige Gemara. V'oid Moshe Rabashi. So now we have the second kasha that's going to be unanswered, yet the third kasha on Rabashi, because the first kasha of Shravia asked and answered. This is a long brisa, and from only one small point in the brisa are we going to bring our raya, but this brisa is going to reveal for us and uncover for us the reasoning for a lot of halachas that we learned in the Mishnah. I would only know that if a Nazir becomes Tameh, all of the time that he's Tameh won't count towards his Naziris. Yemei Chalutoi Minayin. How do I know if you have a Metzora who's already what I call condemned, meaning the Kohen already said this is a real Nega and he's dealing with his Taras? How do we know that those days don't count towards his count of Naziris? Vidinu. We have a svara, like a binyan. You may tuma migaleach umevi carbon. At the end of the process of someone as a nazir who becomes tamei, the process is he takes a haircut and he brings a carbon. You may chalutoi. Guess what? The higher process of a mitzayra is quite similar. Migaleach umevi carbon. Although he takes two haircuts, but there's still haircutting, and he brings a carbon. There's actually a fundamental difference between the giluch of the Nazir, which is only his head, and the giluch of Mitzayir, which is every single hair on his body. But they both get haircuts and they bring korbanos. So they're similar. So let's suggest other similarities. We know when someone is tamei, those days surely don't count towards his tally of Naziris. So too, a Mitzayir who's condemned, those days do not count as part of the tally of his Naziris. Zok Gemara, that's not a good raya. Mace is worse, and that's why its days don't count towards the tally of Naziris. But a Mitzayir, not so much. We know b'meitum not only can't you count the days that you're tamei, but any days that you had already counted before you became tamei, they also get lost, and you reset the count. Can you compare that to a mitzayir b'meichelutai she'ein mevatel b'henes hakoydmin? The b'meichelutai, if any days were counted prior to him getting teras, those days would count. It's on this line in the Gemara that the Gemara is going to prove that our brisa cannot hold like Reb Chisda. But we'll get back to that later. Amrit kal v'chaymer. So from here on is all going to be just extra information, not part of our kash on Reb Chisda. Nevertheless, interesting information. So how do we know that a Mitzayah during the days that he's a Mitzayah, that those days do not count towards his Naziris? Amrit kal v'chaymer. Uman Nazir b'kever. Now we're switching from a regular Nazir to a Nazir b'kever. We had the case of Nazir b'kever. He was makabel Naziris while he was in the basic forest. So there, the Naziris we learned doesn't even start till he leaves the basic forest. He's retire himself. So any days that he counted won't count. You know why? Because there were no days before he started to count. So Uma Nazir b'kever. Shesayre ro l'taglachas Naziris. The hair that he has growing on his head at that time will be hair that will be able to be used to discharge his Naziris at the end of his Naziris, because the hair is going to remain there, and therefore it'll be able to be used when he has to discharge his Naziris. Don't forget, that hair will not be cut when this Nazir is Matahir himself, because we don't look at him like he was a Nazir that became Tamei. since he was only Mekabel Naziris in the basic forest, we say his Naziris doesn't even start till he's Matar himself. So therefore, he doesn't need the Taglachas of a Nazir who became Tamei. He'll only first start counting his Naziris after he's Matar himself, which means his hair will remain on his head until he's ready to finish his Naziris b'tahira. We had a shaila fees over it. Not to push it, not to push it. So nevertheless, they don't count. They don't count. You make chilutai. So you know why the days don't count min minyan? It's because they're not there. It's because you don't start counting at all, right? Nevertheless, it's minyan. So you make chilutai when you have a mitzayra who's now condemned. The hair on this mitzayra's head will not be able to be used to discharge his naziris. You know why? Because it needs to be used to discharge his taras. So loy kolshkein, surely the days that he's a mitzayra should not be min minyan. So that's how we know. So our mission told us you may gomray. We had no idea why. Now we know why. It's a kavachomer from Nazir bekever. Okay, so vainly el yemei chaluta. That's how I know when a Nazir, when the coin already passed, and you are a mitzayra, from there on he cannot count those days. But you may say for minayin, what happens after he gets healed from his naziris and he gets his first haircut, and now he has to count 7 days to his second haircut? How do I know that those 7 days also don't count as the tally towards his naziris attire? So it's a svara as well. Ma yimei chalutai, just like yimei chalutai. Ton taglachas, just like yimei chalutai needs taglachas. Af yimei sifroi, so too yimei sifroi. So that we know, right? We know at the end of his saras, when he first gets healed, he gets a haircut. Then he counts 7 days, and he gets another haircut. So just like the period of chalutai ends with a taglachas, so too the period of shivir ends with taglachas. That's a given. Now we don't need a mamatzinu for that. The Torah tells us. So we want to extend that similarity. Just like you make chilutai, like we just proved from the Kavachomer, from Nazir Bekever, af you may sifroi, so too you may sifroi. So now we know how our Mishnah got it from, that you may sifroi, you may gomroi, are ein min haminyan. Yochel af you may eskera kain. Right? Then our Mishnah says, by the way, when the mitzayra is locked up for observation, when he's quarantined for observation, all of those days do count towards his naziris. Zok the Brisa, maybe those days also should not count towards his naziris. And there might be a logical argument to make to support that, because cholot metama mishka b'moshe, a mitzayra who's condemned as a vaday mitzayra, he's metama mishka b'moshe. It means anything he lies or sits on, even if he's not physically touching them, will be tamei. So everybody knows the famous story with the princess and the pea. If there's 10 mattresses and there's a pea underneath, yes, it will still become tamei because it's the weight of the person, the weight of the mitzvah is on that device, on that object. Even while somebody is merely under observation, under quarantine for mitzvah, he's also metama mishka b'moshe. So im l'madta limei chalutai. If we learned with the Kavachomer that Yemei Chilutai do not count towards his count of Nazirs, so let's say that this same principle should apply to the days of quarantine. Af Yemei Heskeiroi Ein Oil Dominamin. Dr. Bryce said, no, that much we won't say. Amrit Loyim Amrit B'mei Chilutai. Why B'mei Chilutai do we say that it's Ein Oil Dominamin She'ein Chilutai Ton Taglachas? Shekain chalutit taglachas. At the end of your period of mitzayra, the mitzayra as part of his healing process requires a taglachas, and it may be carbon. And as part of the healing process for tzaras, the mitzayra must bring a carbon. Therefore, that might be the reason why the days that someone's a mitzayra vadoyis, his days don't count towards his naziris. Timer b'mei askeroi. The Einoi may be carbon, but when someone's under observation, yes, he's Matama Mishka b'Moshe, but he doesn't have a tahira process like the real Mitzayra does. He doesn't need the haircuts. He doesn't need the carbon. Therefore, It's Oil which now explains our Mishnah that said the Emes Amru that a Mitzayah during his Yemei Hesker, those days do count towards his Naziris. Mikan Amru, Yemei Sifrai, Yemei Gamrai, Ein Loy Min Aminin. So like 3.5 lines in the Mishnah was explained with 20 lines in the Brisa. Avol Yemei Azava Azava, Vesgerish Mitzayah, Hare Elu Oil Loy. So this is a long Brisa that clarifies and reveals the meaning behind the halacha of the Mishnah. Now we're going to go back to analyze one little line. Okay, we'll discuss that later. That's an extra kasha. I want to stick to the exact logic of We'll discuss that later. So now let's go back and analyze the one line of the Brisa. Loy im amrit b'mei tuma. Shekain mevatel b'henes hakodim. Don't bring me a raya from the Yemei Tumah, because when a Nazir becomes Tamei Tumas Meis, it's mevatel all of the days that he counted up until the time he became Tamei, and you reset the clock. Timer b'mei chalutai, and you cannot therefore say that. We should also say that when someone's a Mitzayah, that the days that he's a Mitzayah do not count towards his Naziris. So let's think about this argument, this specific line, this specific argument in the Brisa, where the Brisa wanted to show us that you cannot learn from Yemei Tumah to Yemei Chalutai that those days shouldn't count. B'mai, exactly what are we talking about? Ilema b'Nazir Smuetis. If this comparison between Yemei Tumah and Yemei Chalutai, between the Nazir that became Tamei and the Nazir that became a Mitzayah, if we're talking about a 30-day Naziris, then of course, how could you say that b'mei chalutai it's not mevatel the koydman? B'mei chalutai it would be mevatel the koydman, because if your whole Naziris was only for 30 days, and now you're going to have to wait another 30 days after your mitzvah is cleared, so weiter it's mevatel the koydman because you need the 30 days. So that can't be what the Bryce is talking about. It must be that the Bryce is referring to a case where you made a very long Naziris, where you'd have plenty of time after you finish your taras to have 30 days of hair growth. And nevertheless, what does the Bryce say in that specific case? The Bryce tells us at the end of the day that the days of his taras do not count towards his Naziris, even though you had plenty of time after the taras was completely finished with to have 30 days of Gidul. That's not like Reb Chisda. Alma loy solken loy shmami no. You see clearly that the days of taras structurally do not count towards the minion of his Naziris. Rather, you see that, and not like Reb Chisda, who says that they would count. Rather, you just need the 30 days of growth. Beautiful. So that takes care of this Gemara. We can't totally forget about this Gemara because we're going to have a part 2 to this Gemara when the Gemara analyzes how you deal with the karbanos. So we're going to be able to dig again once into this highly complex sugya. Just know that Soita is coming soon, and Soita is a gishmaka, easy Gemara with a lot of agadita. So life is going to get easy. So just like the women, we're going to have to work very hard until Pesach, and then come Pesach, they'll still continue to work hard, and we'll relax with Soita. Gewaltig. Before Pesach. Just before Pesach. Okay, gewaltig. I was complaining to my sister-in-law that I'm getting very stressed out because of Pesach. Because every time I want to relax on the couch, it doesn't feel so good. If my wife's slaving downstairs, how can I just relax on the couch? So it's almost the stress of the pre-Pesach rush. It's very difficult. Zok to Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer mishum Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer is telling the name of Rabbi Yeshua. Kol tuma min hameis. Shenozim megalech aleha. Chayaven aleha al bi'as mikdash. So this is a very, very important thing, because we thought that some of the halachas of Naziris, we learned there's special rules, even if you're mamish tamei meis and you require hazah shlishi ushvi, such as you came into contact with the revius dam, you came into contact with the roiva kav of a tzomos, you're a regular tamei meis. Yet, because of halacha l'moshe misinais, you're not going to discharge your Naziris. It's not about your Naziris. So you see this. So I thought this is P'chachidish din in Naziris. But we see now it's a din in Tumah because there's other nafkaminas as well. And what does the Mishnah say? You know what travels together? Called Tumana Minamesha Nozim Megalech Aleh Chayavin Aleh Al Beis Mikdash. You're mechuyev a carbon oil of a yard if you go into the Beis Hamikdash when you're tummy. That's only with a tumah that the Nazir would be Megalech Aleh. But not if it wasn't Megalech. Meaning, if you came into contact with a Revi'ah Stam, you're tummy mace. A Nazir is not Megalech for it. And if you walk into the Beis Hamikdash with that tumah, you don't have the parish of coming into the Beis Hamikdash with tumah. So you see, there's a difference in the tumah. We learned in Tosfos that also applies to a kohen. A kohen is only prohibited from becoming tamei to a mace that a Nazir would be megalech aleh. But a kohen would not be prohibited to touch a revi'as dam in a mace or roiva hakav shel atzomos. Oh, I'm not saying it's permitted. I'm not saying that we're going to give him after. I'm not saying him after. Shishi we can't give him. Shlishi we can't give him. But we're not going to give him after. I hear. Amrav Meir, this type of tumas mei should be no worse than a sheretz. And if you look up, it's actually this week's parsha. It's in Parshas Vayikra. If you look up this week's parsha, you're going to see that the Torah specifically says if you touch a sheretz, a kohen touches a sheretz, you can't come into the Beis Hamikdash. So surely a tumas meis, even if it's a tumas meis that a nazir is not megalech aleh, it should still be off. Correct the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer said this in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. Frank the Gemara of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua Gamarla. Are you telling me that Rabbi Eliezer heard it straight from Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Yeshua Bar Mama Gamarla. Rabbi Eliezer's source is not Rabbi Yeshua. It's Rabbi Yeshua Bar Mama who he learned it from. The time we learned, Rabbi Eliezer said, Kishalachni la'ardiskaya. When they went to Ardiskaya, Matzasis Rabbi Yeshua ben Peser Roish. Peser Roish was the name of a person. You very, very rarely find an Amoira or a Tana with two names. He had a name, Peser Roish. And there's actually a Tshuvas Noida Yehuda about two names. And he writes, first of all, the reason why I delayed you in answering your tshuva is because it wasn't halacha l'maisa. So I had to put it aside. But he said that you don't find anyone in Tanakh who has two names, although there are exceptions such as Sofas Paneach and Tuval Kayin, but generally you don't find somebody with two names. In the Tanoim, you never find somebody with two names. You never find somebody with two names. It's very rare to find somebody with two names. So he says, whenever you have the name Baribi, if the name Baribi is said by itself, that was his actual name. But if there's a name before the Baribi, like Rabbi Yochanan Baribi, then Baribi is merely a title. So whenever you find, it's very rare to find two names, although this is two names. So anyway, so it says, he was saying over Torah in halach in front of Reb Meir, and he said as follows: Kol tuma min ameis shanazir megalech aleha. Any tuma of mace that the nazir is megalech on our sugya chayavin alei mishum bias mikdash. The kol tuma min ameis she'ein nazir megalech aleha ein chayavin alei mishum bias mikdash. Amalai, Reb Meir told him, I don't like this shot. Al tezu kalami sheretz. Amar tiloi. So I butt in, and I said the following thing. So who's sharing this story? Rabbi Eliezer said, I went and I saw Rabbi Yeshua saying this halacha over. And I asked him, Amar le klum atabaki Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo. Do you know Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo's Torah? Amar le, yeah, I know Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo's Torah. So Rabbi Eliezer said, Kach Omer li Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo. Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo told me, Yeshua Rabbi Yeshua, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that kol tuma min ameis shanozim megalech aleh chayav lo mishum bias mikdash v'chol tuma min ameis she'ein nozim megalech aleh ein chayav aleh mishum bias mikdash. Mishum Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo gomer lo. So let's think about it. Rabbi Yeshua was at the top of the chain, right? Then he told it over to Rabbi Yeshua bar Mamo, who then told it over to Rabbi Eliezer, right? So in our Mishnah, look, Rabbi Eliezer said it over. He didn't quote it from who told it to him. He went to the top of the food chain. What shot? Zokt Gemara Mikan Amr Mishmamino. We see from here. Kol Shmaitza. This Ms. Amra the Beit Plasa. If there was a halacha that was passed down 3 times from A to B, from B to C, then The halacha is kadmoyu basroy aminon. The minimum that you need to quote to be mekayim the kol ha'omer davar b'shem omer. Maybe Gula Olam is the first originator of the halacha and the last Rebbe who you heard it from. But mitzioi, anybody who it passed through in the middle, you don't have to. So when you forward an email that was forwarded 1,000 times, you need to include the address of the first person who wrote that email and the person that you got it from. All the guys in the middle, you are allowed to delete. You're allowed to delete, right? So therefore, kadmoy b'shor aminan mitzioi lo aminan. We also learned a similar halacha. I got this from Rabbi Miyashia, Shekibel me Abba, who got it from his father, Shekibel min Hazugais, who got it from the Zugais, and we know there's a whole series of pairs about Bezins and Nasi that the Mishnah lists off in Pirkei Avos, the generation after generation after generation. Who did they get it from? And David Zolti, this is going to answer a question that you had about Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, where they got into the food chain of Psak. Shekiblu min Nevi'im, they were Makabel from the Nevi'im, and I believe the Mefarshim say here the Nevi'im are Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, right? That's what Tosha says. Shekiblu Nevi'im, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. Shekiblu halacha l'Moshe Messinai. So they were a main interchange of halacha. They were a major part of the Messiah. Shekiblu Nevi'im, halacha l'Moshe Messinai. But there's someone glaringly omitted from this Yichus brief. V'zerei b'Shabbos, v'chardol, v'shnayim, v'shloshim v'koymos. If you plant, it's not Shabbos, it's Shabbos, it's some type of plant, and mustard in 3 different places, even though it's one field, dill. Shenoisen payam mikol echad ve'echad. You have to give payah from each area, unless you cut them all together. Yet, you know who he was missing in the Shalas of Psak? Yeshua v'kol of like a choshev. It skipped from the Nevi'im to Allah Moshe Sinai. It skipped out somebody in the middle. Shema mina, that you're allowed to skip out people in the middle. The Psak halacha is, if you could list everybody up until Moshe Rabbeinu, you should, but that doesn't mean you should spend your lifetime just writing the list. So normally you'll just mention the beginning and the end, and that will be good enough. As an aside, we know there's a word, davar maybe geula. So the pshat that they say in it, that some people say in it, I believe Rabbi Solomon said this, is that pshat of davar it doesn't necessarily mean specifically you said the davar. It's talking about a type of person, a person who doesn't make it all about me. Rather, he's a person who's happy to be on the sidelines, affect change, but not take the credit for it. That's the type of person who's maybe gula olam. And they say a pshat that not the pashut, there's a medrash that says a very interesting pshat. That there was a tviyah on Moshe Rabbeinu when they said Ish Mitzri, an Ish Mitzri saved us. They told Yisrael, the daughters of Yisrael told Yisrael, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, that an Ish Mitzri saved us. It was a tviyah on him. Why he didn't say I'm not a Mitzri, I'm a Yid. Like Yosef in Mitzrayim, everybody knew he was a Yid. Moshe flew under the radar. How are you talking? But there's another Tanchum that people aren't so aware of, and that is when it says Ish Mitzri, what Moshe Rabbeinu said, it's not me that saved you, it's the Mitzri that I killed. Had I not killed him, I would have never shown up here because I wouldn't have had to run away. So you were not saved. You were only saved. Why? Because of that Ish Mitzri. So I believe it Rabbi Yosy said a beautiful word. Who does the Rebbeinu Shalom pick to be a leader in Klal Yisrael, to bring the Geula? Who the Kodesh Baruch Hu pick for Mashiach? Is it somebody who says, me, I'm on top of the world, I can fix it? Or is it going to be the discreet guy who does Gewaltige Sachen, but he pulls himself out of the picture and nobody has to know what he did? So maybe Geula, we're not talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom. The person himself will be Geula Lolam. The person who's Aymer Davar B'Shem Aymer, someone who doesn't always have to be in the spotlight, he will be the one that will bring the Geula Lolam. Just like Esther, she was the main hinge that brought Geula, that saved us from the Eitz of Haman and Russia, because she didn't have to take the credit. She was happy that Mordechai should have the credit of saving the king. Okay, so I'm Rabbi Kiva. Danti Lefnei Rabbi Eliezer. Now we're on today's up. Danti Lefnei Rabbi Eliezer. Ma'im etzem kisoira. She'enim etama adam ba'oil. Ma'im etzem kisoira. Which we know is only Matama Bamaga, like we learned in the Mishnah. And therefore, if a Nazir touches it, yes, he will have to start over his Naziris. But if he's in the oil with an Etzem Kesayr, it does nothing at all. Nevertheless, touching it, Hanazir Megaleich Amagoi, Balmasai. So Revius Dam, Shumatama Adam Ba'oil. We know Revius Dam is Matama Adam Ba'oil. We clarified that. Yet, it's not going to be Sosha Naziris. We should have a Kavah Chomer from Etzem Kesayr. Eino Din, Sheyein Hazir Megaleich Amagoi Balmasai. Amar Li. So when Rabbi Kiva said, when I said this over in front of Rabbi Eliezer shot me down. Amali Maza Kiva, ain't done can be Kavah Chomer. This is not a place for a Kavah Chomer. But he didn't tell me why. So I was still persistent. So when I shared this same Svar with Rabbi Yeshua, Amali, he told me, Yafa Amrit. You're right. Be'etzim, you have a very nice argument. Elakain Amr Alacha. But that's the Alacha L'Moshe Messinai, that someone who became Tomei from a Roiva, a Revi of Dam, he does not share his Naziris. And the last sentence that I just said might not be accurate. We're going to see in just a moment. Sorry? Ich verstehe. Yeah, very good. Iboilus, yeah, as a mechanech, if I verstehe it. Iboilu, frankly more. What exactly did Rabbi Yeshua explain to Rabbi Kiva why this Kavah Chomer cannot work? Did he mean to say that Etzem Kesayra is a halacha? That we know that an Etzem Kesayra, the Nazir is Megaleich Aleha. There's no pasuk that says it. We had a pasuk that says an Etzem Kesayra makes you tamei, but we didn't have a pasuk that says beferish that an Etzem Kesayra will cause a tumah that the Nazir is Megaleich. That's a halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai. Urevi is dam Kavah Chomer, and you want to export a halacha that you only know from halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai, and you want to export it to a Revius Dam using a Kavah Chomer that it also should stare the Naziris. They ain't done in Kavah Chomer me'alacha. If you have a Mikar of a halacha, that's halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai, it's very unique. And you cannot use a Kavah Chomer, you cannot use logic to export that all around, because halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai defies logic. Or maybe it's the opposite. It's Revius Dam halacha. We know that a Revius Dam is Matama Ba'oil. The Mikor that Revius Dam is Matama Ba'oil is halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai. The Etzem Kesayra Kavah Chomer. And we want to use Etzem Kesayra through a Kavah Chomer to enhance the tumah of someone who became tamei with Revius Dam, and say, even though it's halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai that it's tamei, I'm going to use a Kavah Chomer to upgrade that at the stage Shter Naziris. Vein done in Kavah Chomer me'alacha. Since the Mikor that a Revius Dam is tamei, is a halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai, you can't change it, enhance it, modify it, clarify it with a Kavah Chomer. You stick to the halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai that it's tamei, but it doesn't shter the Naziris. Tashma. Let's see what the real pshat is. It says in the Brisa, Etzem Kesayra halacha, Etzem Kesayra that it's tamei and that it shares the Naziris is a halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai. Revius Dam Kavah Chomer, they ain't done in Kavah Chomer me'alacha. So in fact, the Gemara proves like the first side that Revius Dam you might know of out of a pasuk that it's mitame, and Etzem Kesayra we know from a halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai that it shares Naziris, and since Etzem Kesayra you only know that it shares Naziris. From halacha l'Moshe B'Sinai you could not export that information. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we finished the 7th parak of Nazir, but we're not out of the dark yet. We're not out of the wood yet, because the next parak is also Tumah Tahira. That's going to be difficult. But we're sort of limping towards the end. How did Allah Kain Gadol b'li neder? How did Allah Kain Gadol b'li neder? How did Allah Kain Gadol? Zok Telik Mishnah. Shnei Nazirim. There's 2 Nazirim, and the Mefarish says something fascinating. Shekiblu alayam Naziris biyachad. They were makabel their Naziris together. We're going to soon see from the Mishnah that it's not relevant that they were makabel their Naziris together. So why the Mefarish wanted to say that they were makabel Naziris together, we're going to see. It's going to come out in the Shaklatay of the Gemara, and you're going to be so grateful to the Mefarish, because this little line in the Mefarish eliminates like 20 layers of complication of how we would have to figure out what's going on. Why? Because what he does is he places that they were both being makabel Naziris on the same day. So day 1 for me is day 1 for him. if we were on different days, it would make the Gemara 10 times more complicated. So thank you, Mefarish, for saving us from that extra level of complication. Shnei Nazirin she'amar lahen, echad. A third party told them, Ra'isi echad mikem shenitma. I saw that one of you two fellows became tummy. Ve'einu yodea eze mikem, but I don't know which one. So one of you two people have a geshter to Naziris. The halacha is megalchin. They both need a haircut. Umavin carbon tuma, and they bring a carbon tuma, the carbon tahira. So basically, they wait to the end of the 30-day Naziris period. They both get their haircut. They both need a haircut. One's tummy, one's tar. They both need a haircut, and they bring two karbanis, two sets of karbanis. Two sets. One is if they're discharging carbon tuma, and one if they're discharging carbon tahira, because one is discharging Naziris to tahira, and one is discharging Naziris to tuma. But they make a t'nai to identify which carbon belongs to which Nazir. You see how complicated this will be if they didn't finish on the same day? So we have to thank the Mefarish. Even before we know what we're getting into, the Mefarish is trying to keep things crystal clear. And he says, and Taisha says you don't have to say it. The other Rishonim say you do have to say it. Imanihu tameh, then carbon tumah shali, the carbon tire shalach. The manihu atar, and if I'm the tar, then carbon tire shali, the carbon tumah shalach. Then b'soifin shloshim yoim, because don't forget the fellow who became tameh, he's now going to count another 30 days. So which they both have to, because they both might be the one that was tameh. B'soifin shloshim yoim, moving carbon tahira. Then they only bring the carbon tahira at that point, because even if one of them is tameh, he had already discharged his tumah after the first 30 days. If I was the one that was tameh, then carbon tumah shali, the carbon tumah from 30 days ago was mine. The carbon tahira shalach, and the carbon tire from 30 days ago was yours. V'zeh carbon tire Yosy, and this carbon now is mine. The maniu atar, and carbon tire shali, the carbon tumah shalach, v'zeh carbon tire seif. Right. Well, because then the question is chulun lazara. There's a lot of problems over here. Chulun lazara. So I don't know how you would deal with it. You can't bring a carbon on suffix. Here, no matter who it's for, you can bring the carbon. It's just a matter of who it's for, right? Because there's chatas to bring. So that's we never dealt with that complicated case of how to deal with the karbanos. Why is there a problem with chulun lazara? How did you bring the karbanos? We figured out the teglachas, but there's a whole other layer of complication that we have to deal with this karbanos. Correct. The one that was tar only has one set of karbanos. That's right. Yizok the Gemara. Katani we learned. Shnei Nazirim she'amar lahem. Two Nazirim. Okay, 6:50. So we'll stop now. We did part of today's daf, but we will catch up. Don't worry. Okay, shkoich. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Hatzlacha dike bracha dike day. Oh, okay.